Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Club. I am your host, Jamil Payne, and with me, as always, is our own quarantine dancing queen, Amanda Coleman. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm doing all right. Uh, Still recovering from a movie about quarantine dancing that
Uh-oh.
I happened to watch last night.
So I guess we're just gonna. Okay, let me start off. We are talking. This is week 3 of Watchmen month. We are talking Doomsday Clock today. But before we do that, Amanda will have something to share with the class. Amanda, would you like to share?
Uh, yeah, so I finally watched Sucker Punch,
Mm-hmm.
which is a movie that when it came out, I remember looking at the trailer and going like, who's been reading my diary? Like on paper, I should like this movie. It's like cute girls kicking ass, like action movie, weird fantasy thing. I don't know. Um, and I mean, way to review this movie is just from what I tweeted, which was while I was watching it was first, this girl looks like she's 30. Next, when will she have any dialogue? And then about 10 minutes after that, oh no, when I realized that the point of the movie is that the main character doesn't actually really ever have any dialogue. Um,
Oh,
so
you,
that
you
was
you forgot
that
my
was
tweet, which was just hysterical laughing.
yeah. It's funny. I would have liked the movie if any of the characters were characters.
I've seen Sucker Punch in the movie theater,
Okay.
and I don't say I like it, but
Okay, so I've been joking with my friends all week about Quibi, the TV streaming app thing where it was supposed to be like watch things in 10-minute chunks,
mm,
which obviously, I mean, like a huge hilarious failure. And our joke has been, like we're all watching a movie like in like a group chat or something, and we'll get 10 minutes in and everybody's like, okay, that's it, it's all over, what do you guys think, wasn't this great? um Sucker Punch would have been great in 10-minute installments.
hmm, okay,
Like individual scenes from this movie were really badass, but
right.
then when you stack them all on top of each other, you're like, wait, she really doesn't talk. I was also really frustrated that it was like at one level it was a movie about dancing as escapism, but then we
Hmm.
never actually see any dancing.
Right, right.
So that was really frustrating too. Because I thought that there should be multiple kinds of fantasies. It shouldn't be exclusively like steampunk matrix Japanese schoolgirl babes in World War I with dragons.
Everything about what you just said sounds great until like the execution.
No, that's just it. And that was my original assessment of the movie. Was I was like, on paper, I love all of these words. If I'm not the target demographic for this movie, I don't know who is. And then I put it on, and I'm like, oh, really? I forgot to add protagonist has agency and speaks.
Right.
Like this movie almost fails the Bechdel test. Like if the main character doesn't speak, I don't know if it even counts as a movie. Um,
Hmm.
I actually saw in theaters, was it Hardcore Henry,
Yes.
which was the little experimental, like we're just gonna do a point of view short, like 90-minute video game movie.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like the quote character in that movie had more agency and did more stuff despite never speaking for the entire movie.
Right.
Like this was just it was just so frustrating because parts of it looked so cool.
Do we need to mention who this movie is directed by?
Um, I mean, it's directed by the king of making 10-minute bites of movies look really cool and then somehow not stacking the whole thing together in a way that makes sense. Should have known. Should have known.
This movie is written and directed by Zack Snyder, and you can tell. Like,
Yeah.
like we always say Zack Snyder is good when he has a strong a strong screenplay, right? Which he rarely has, right? But like, you know, you look at something like, you know, his first movie, which is, I think, is Dawn of the Dead, right? Which is a pretty good zombie flick. You look at something like 300, which is a pretty good, you know, which is a pretty good, which shit, that's the one that made him famous. And, you know, even though we kind of mixed to negative on Watchmen, it's at least, like, comfortably made. You know what I'm saying? Like, again, like we said, everybody does their job, even though it doesn't add up. But,
Yeah.
like, this is Zack Snyder fully unleashed onto the world.
Well, and what's maybe even more uncomfortable about it is this is also Zack Snyder's sexuality. Like, we know what he thinks about when he masturbates.
I mean, yeah, maybe. Like, I never thought about
I
it.
mean,
Like,
well, I mean, like, I'm gonna be honest. I don't know many women who would daydream about World War One.
oh, well, yeah, yeah, yeah. That, right, that, of all the fantasy worlds, that was the one that kind of took me back a bit.
Yeah. And I mean, like, yeah, like some women are history nerds, but I was just like, that is such a guy thing.
Right, biplanes and shit, you know what I'm saying? Like, not just World War One, which is very
Mm,
specific, right? But World War One with demons, or orcs or whatever.
yeah.
And it's just like, what the fuck is going on? Now, you actually haven't mentioned, I thought, the thing that would get on your nerves more, the most of anything, especially after watching Watchmen, is the music. Because the music in this movie is very distracting.
Um, I mean, the music was really distracting and really bad, but I had already like mentally checked out of the movie before it even got to be like that bad.
So, like, for anybody that doesn't know, is, and we talked about this, but Watchmen was like, Zack Snyder has a tendency, if he can, to choose very what's the word I'm looking for, obvious pop songs, right?
Yeah.
He does that in this movie, but they're all really terrible covers of those pop songs.
Yeah.
So it's just like a double whammy of very obvious pop songs on top of, like, you know, terrible covers. Like, you know, there's a cover of a Beatles song in here, and I'm just like, no, what the fuck? No. Like, you don't do that. Stop it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I would ask you what you think about any of the characters, but like you said, there's really no like this. I will say this is the first time I ever heard of Oscar Isaac was in this movie.
Yeah, and he really was the only one who was allowed to like have two facial expressions.
Right, like he's the only one that's really trying, it
Yeah.
seems. Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
Which
go ahead.
and also like he steals every single moment he's on the screen.
Right.
I was gonna say as a Watchmen connection, I think that the female psychiatrist slash dance mistress was Sally Jupiter from the Watchmen movie.
Um, Amanda, Carla Gugino has like this weird history with comic book movies. She's actually like been in like several notable a couple of notable comic book movies. Mainly, she was in Sin City, and she was in Watchmen. And like, even though those are directed by it seems like she has a certain type of comic book movie she likes to be in. It seems.
Or maybe just a good agent.
Right, right, or terrible agent, depending on how you feel
Yeah,
about
that's
those
that's
movies.
true. I also, while we were since we brought her up, I pulled her up in IMDb, and it says she also did voice acting for Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, it says that she's like the voice of the ship from the Kryptonian ship or something.
So she's kind of like she's a bit of a muse for Zack Snyder and Robert Rodriguez because she's in like a few Robert Rodriguez movies. So,
Yeah.
so like, yeah. It again so weird because she started on Spin City. Like I remember her on Spin City. Like I remember thinking like as like a 13-year-old boy like how beautiful she was. Then like she goes on and be in all these movies. Weird aside, but yes. So yes, she's in there. I like it's
And
weird.
again, given almost nothing to do. But
Almost nothing.
the
So
point of today wasn't to talk about how Sucker Punch ruined my night. It was to talk about how Doomsday Clock ruined my week.
wow.
Is that a good segue?
I was gonna keep talking about Sucker Punch, but maybe you're right. Okay, today we are talking Doomsday Clock from DC Comics, written by Geoff Johns, with art by Gary Frank, with lettering by Rob Lee, and the coloring by Brad Anderson. This comic, which was severely delayed, ran over 2 years from November of 2017 to December of 2019. So 2 years it took for these 12 issues to come out.
I mean,
It,
I think that's not too slow, right?
oh no, that's super slow. So it reads: The world of Watchmen collides with the DC universe in the most shocking story in DC history. Written by master storyteller Geoff Johns and Gary Frank. As the Doomsday Clock ticks towards midnight, the DC Universe will encounter its greatest threat, Dr. Manhattan. But nothing is hidden from Manhattan, and the secrets of the past, present, and future will leave ramifications on all our heroes' lives forever. So, Amanda,
Yeah.
we're going to get into history in this book, but right now, your initial thoughts on Doomsday Clock.
Um. So why?
Hi.
Um. I just so Watchmen, I said,
Mm-hmm.
was an amazing book, but not a super enjoyable read. But it was still, I mean, like, it was really good, and it feels like a complete story, and it's probably almost endlessly rereadable in terms of just the density of story that they got into one volume. Um, when you go to add to a story like that, there better be a payoff, right? You're taking a risk. There should be some reward. There is no reward. Like, why? What, this doesn't add to Watchmen at all.
If anything, it detracts from it.
Yes. But at least it's forgettable. Like, it's so easy for me to just imagine that this doesn't exist.
Ooh, that's rough.
I know,
That's rough.
right?
Ooh, that is rough. Honestly, though, my opinions aren't much different. Look, so okay, so
Okay,
what do we?
let's start with the good.
Yeah.
The art and the design and the lettering was really great. So
Right. Is it
everyone took the information they were given and did what they were supposed to do with it.
right? And honestly, I would say the writing isn't that bad. It's just this type of story was always gonna feel unnecessary, no matter what you wrote.
Yeah.
Like,
And this also clearly feels to me like there was an outline that they were trying to follow, and that the outline itself didn't really make sense and wasn't justified. So it was hard to get the story. It all felt so unmotivated. Um, yeah, I'm sorry. It's so frustrating. It's so
this
disappointing.
this comic smells of hubris.
Mm.
Geoff Johns, if I'm being honest, has been my favorite comic book writer of the last 20 years, right? Like, like the last couple of decades, close to it, right? Between his Justice Society and his Green Lantern, like Geoff Johns has been DC's golden boy, cause he can take these concepts, right? These ridiculous concepts, and somehow make them make sense with engaging characters. But now we're like deep into his career. It feels like I'm Geoff Johns. I can do anything, even write Watchmen.
Yeah.
Now, I could be wrong, right? This could have been a DC mandate. You know what I'm saying? This could be this, and he just like, well, if anybody's gonna write it, it should be me, because God knows you can't trust anybody else with it, right? It could
Yeah.
have been that, right? But also, I know, like, even though he's not the publisher, Dan Didio was, I know how much power and sway he holds over the creative direction of DC Comics, right? Without actually
Yeah.
being, like, quote unquote, in charge. Like, there's a complicated history with this book. Should I explain it to everybody? Should I? Because
Um,
I
I
think
mean,
it's
I think it's
important.
important to talk about, because that's what I was implying a little bit with the risk and the reward,
Right, right.
is that there was not just like a storytelling risk, but this is actually like a moral risk.
Yes. So, all good. This story starts with all good story. It starts with the New 52 and the clusterfuck they end up being, right? So apparently, Johns didn't want the New 52 to happen, which is weird since his handprints are all over it. But again, it's that thing of, well, I don't want this to happen, but maybe I can guide it in some type of way, right? So his edict was Rebirth. Rebirth happened a few years ago. Everybody loved Rebirth. It brought DC back to this more hopeful, universe. It brought back a lot of old characters. They basically reset the time clock again. They basically reset the universe, right? Now, there was hints in the New 52 and Rebirth that Dr. Manhattan was coming. Very, very strong hints for years. So they was building up to this shit. Apparently, Doomsday Clock was made in a way to get them to their next big thing. It was supposed to be this was supposed to be the big thing that got them to their next big thing, if that make any sense, right? Because they was strongly hinting at Dr. Manhattan, and and they had like a bunch of they were supposed to have like a bunch of initiatives that come out after Doomsday Clock, which I know you can probably feel because it feel like it's setting up a whole bunch of shit.
Well, there's even specifically there's a scene where Dr. Manhattan almost like outlines what's going to happen in the DC universe for the next like 10 years.
Yes, which is kind of cool and gross at the same time. And but what ended up happening is, since he took so long to write the book, DC kind of had to move past whatever they was going to do with him.
Yeah.
So
No,
now,
it's funny. I just want to say, you said that 12 issues over 2 years is only 50% normal pace. I just want to throw out there, I do remember that, like, specifically Astonishing X-Men and that Sandman Overture prequel, which was only 6 issues. That 6-issue one took like 3 or 4 years to come out.
the problem is with that.
But you're right. If this was meant to match up with a certain main universe event, it doesn't really.
Right.
Well, I don't know. If you're Dr. Manhattan, everything's always happening at the same time. So who the fuck cares?
And like, here's the thing, right? It's kind of bullshit too, because somehow Alan Moore and David Gibbons got the Watchmen out in 12 months. So the greatest comic book ever written was made on time.
Yeah.
Somehow this mediocre ass comic book kept getting delayed. I don't understand. And like, I hate to sound harsh, but I like Geoff Johns. I love Geoff Johns writing usually. But like, okay.
Well, I mean, you can see his strengths as a writer within this. Like, the pacing of this was pretty good. I could totally. This played like a movie in front of my eyes. It was just a mediocre movie. And honestly, when we talk about the TV show, I think 2 or 3 of my favorite ideas from Doomsday Clock actually showed up in the TV show.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So he's not completely off here. It's just, again, the question of the why. Like,
It was made for the wrong reason. It feels like this was
yeah,
made for the wrong reason instead of the right reason. Right? If that, you know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Like, in my opinion, right? I remember when they announced this shit going on 3 or 4 years ago now. I remember everybody that I knew that was into comics was really into this, and I was literally the only one that was just like, no, no. I've been against this idea for 20 years now. Anytime this idea ever comes up in discussions or quotes on the internet, I'm always like, no. I was like, DC and Watchmen are fundamentally different from each other, right? Just fundamentally different. So if you have them interact, you're either going to make DC too dark or you're going to water down the Watchmen. If
yeah.
you have them interact with each other. Like to have these characters interact with each other, one will inevitably affect the other, one way or another. You know what I'm saying? And you definitely get that. You get the worst of both, right? Like the hero, like some of the people in here are way too dark, right? Then but at the same time you have like these hardcore Watchmen characters that's like comic book up a little bit in a way that they wasn't in their own book.
Mm-hmm.
Like the mime has like an invisible magical gun. Like what the fuck, man? Nobody had shit like that in the Watchmen story. Like maybe there's a reason for it that I don't know. But I just thought it was weird that the mind had superpowers.
Yeah.
When like we specifically been told that nobody had superpowers but Dr. Manhattan. It's weird that Ozymandias like okay, he caught a bullet, which was amazing, right? But in here he falls like 20 stories and survives with just like a broken rib.
I mean, I'll throw out that I feel like that's consistent with the type of training we saw that he had.
Okay.
Because he was doing the sort of like he was shown to be really into like I'm gonna like do yoga and meditate and be able to like, walk across coals and lay on beds of nails and like have a truck drive over me and, like at the very limits of what the human body can do. But
So
yeah, it is a little bit like, it's kind of like our complaint with the movie where it's like, was he supposed to be cool and badass, or was he just supposed to be like a really smart kind of badass old schlubby dude? I don't know.
yeah. So I don't even know where to start. It just like it's weird.
So
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I feel like there's one or two scenes or like character beats that we could talk about that I think will just kind of like really clarify the problems that we have with the story, so we don't have to talk about like the whole thing.
Right. Because who wants to do that? No.
I mean, I think the big one is one of the things that was so compelling about the original was that Rorschach was kind of like, hey, what if Batman but in real life?
Right.
And so everyone has always been like, hey, like what if Rorschach and Batman met?
Yeah. It's not even the real Rorschach, but go ahead.
Right. It's not the real Rorschach, but Batman does get to read Rorschach's journal. And his response is interesting. So I guess maybe we should talk about this version of Rorschach.
Well, okay, so I want to say one more thing I would like to say about Geoff Johns and his comic, right? Apparently, Geoff Johns doesn't like Watchmen. He hate what Watchmen did to comic books. So I don't know if he hates it because of the actual comic, or because of what it did the comic books and how it inspired, like, like dark and brooding and all that in comic books. Because Geoff Johns leans more towards the hopeful side of comic books, especially with DC Comics.
Yeah, he clearly does.
But so like a lot of this comic, in my opinion, feels like an indictment on Alan Moore and his way of thinking. But yeah, go ahead now. I had to get that out because I think that's important going forward, like with this comic and how like the Watchmen, because like you brought up Batman reaction to like Rorschach's journal, right? So
Okay, well, so we have a new Rorschach who is the son of the psychiatrist who is treating him, who is treating the first Rorschach. And I think his name is Reggie Long.
Yes. Yeah.
But he was in New York City when the squid landed, and he got some of the psychic fallout, but did not die.
Yeah.
And he was institutionalized in the same facility where Mothman was.
Mm-hmm.
And between his treatment, between his obsession with what his father was doing before he died, and his interactions with Mothman, he becomes the new Rorschach. And I think he really is kind of a proxy for a lot of fans who found that this character was appealing just for having like a really strong conviction about what was right and wrong, and being sort of uncompromising. But the character himself is not that at all.
Which the original Rorschach or this character?
This character is not.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the conviction. He doesn't have the certainty of his actions. He doesn't have any of the actual danger of the original Rorschach. He just kind of wishes he did a little bit.
Right.
And uses that as sort of like a beacon for holding himself together.
So
watered down Rorschach meets Batman and gives him the original Rorschach's journal, and he's like, "You've got to read this, and then you'll understand everything." And Batman reads it and goes, "All right, we're gonna put you in Arkham."
I feel like that's what happened when I made you read Watchmen. Like, you gotta read this, Amanda. Okay, I'm quitting the show now, Jamil. No, I'm just playing.
No. So it's, I mean, I don't think that that's the interaction that people were hoping for.
Right.
I think that what people would have expected would have been for Batman to see some of himself in this character.
Mm-hmm.
For him to recognize that, like, oh, this is the darkness inside me, without any of the, I don't know, like, money and mental health that I have the benefit of.
And the mental health part is a bit shaky, but yeah.
Right. But, like, as far as we know, Batman wasn't squid assaulted. He was only subjected to, the murder of his parents and abuse by all of the villains. And okay, I mean, like, that's a lot also. Never mind.
But no.
They're all damaged. But the idea is that, they're set up as these characters that you want to compare. And then when they meet each other, for them to be sort of dismissive of each other, is a little bit frustrating. And then to have like, I also want to say that, like, Reggie's fixation on pancakes was a little bit Deadpool-y to me.
Yeah.
Or a little bit like Harley Quinn, just like that non sequitur, like they, like, thrown in for a comic beat that played really weird. So it just kind of made Rorschach feel childlike and watered down and immature compared to Batman, when the original Watchmen set it up as the opposite way.
Do you think that's on purpose?
Yeah, I think it's on purpose. I think that Geoff Johns is sort of dismissive of this character and, you know, believes that Batman is the stronger version of the noir crime detective character.
Right.
And I think he at a minimum wanted to make a strong statement that he doesn't think that Rorschach is someone to be admired.
Right. Which again, I get it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, you shouldn't admire Rorschach per se, but I don't know. Look, this is what I'm saying. Okay, I know how Geoff Johns feel, right? But millions of people, probably being generous there, love Rorschach. Some of them love him for the wrong reason, right? I'm like, you know, we talked about that, right?
Yeah.
It's like the people that like hate Walter, that loves Walter White in Breaking Bad, right? They don't get the commentary, right? But there's a reason that character resonates with so many people. And for you to kind of dismiss that strikes me as, I don't know, fucked up. You know what I'm saying? Because, like, Geoff Johns hasn't created any character. And this coming from a person that loves Geoff Johns, that has the longevity and impact and discussion that Rorschach had, who was written by Alan Moore. So for you to kind of dismiss that, if this is the metaphor we think he's going for, again, it goes back to that thing of him hating Watchmen, right? You know what I'm saying? It goes back to that, where it's like, I don't think none of the Watchmen characters come off particularly well in this book.
Well, and it's not just that they come off. So in the original Watchmen, they all come off as characters of, let's say, questionable integrity, but they feel like real people.
Exactly.
And because the characterization for all of them is somewhat nuanced, we get sympathetic and not sympathetic versions of every character in the original Watchmen. For this follow-up Doomsday Clock series, we get pretty much only the unsympathetic versions, and then we get them compared to, like, good versions of all the DC characters that they're parallel to.
Yeah.
Like, Veidt is compared to Lex Luthor, and somehow Lex comes out seeming, like, cooler and better.
Yeah.
No, like, that's not how it's supposed to happen. Like, Lex is supposed to be, like, the cartoony version of Veidt. Lex is supposed to be like, wow, I wish I was Adrian. So I feel like it was almost like disrespectful of the Watchmen characters, that it didn't give them any of the gravitas or respect that they deserve, mostly just from, like, only showing them one way, not letting us have more sides of them.
Like, they bring the comedian into this, and, like,
for no reason.
No reason, none. And, like, it's the worst version of the comedian at that, right?
Yep.
It's like Vietnam era comedian, which is weird because we know towards the end of his life, he was, like, changing and thinking about things differently.
Yeah.
Than what he did. But no, that the Manhattan zaps him, 2 seconds before he hits the ground.
Yeah.
And instead of having that version, the more introspective version of the comedian towards the end of his life, we get the crazy Vietnam versions, you know, torturing people to death comedian.
Right, and that's another face-off, I guess you could say, is that people were like, oh, like, the comedian versus the Joker. Right? Yeah. And again, that's one where, like, the Joker should look at the comedian and be like, wow, like like, I see myself in this man, and yet, and there wasn't really any of that.
Yeah.
So, I guess, there's one more, like, scene I kind of want to bring up.
Go ahead.
Which is kind of the climax. The Dr. Manhattan explains the metaverse.
I want to say something. My favorite issue.
Yes, but it also effectively removes all of the stakes from everything.
In a way, yes.
But yeah, so I feel like Dr. Manhattan explains the metaverse, I feel like is the closest that Geoff Johns got to emulating Alan Moore. And I'm not thinking about like Watchmen Alan Moore, I'm thinking about like Promethea Alan Moore or Swamp Thing Alan Moore, right, where he's kind of building a story about the story. But I mean, essentially it's this idea that we already have this concept of there being the multiverse with multiple versions of all of the DC characters.
Right.
So this is introducing the idea that there is actually one reality where you go to that universe and that is where other multiverses branch off from it. So that this is like where you go to create the seeds of other. Dr. Manhattan introduces this idea that there's sort of a prime universe, this metaverse, where you can create the seeds of other multiverses. So this is meant to explain why Superman shows up in so many of these different universes. It's not like every multiverse started on its own independently. It's more like you copy paste and then change something.
Yeah.
And Dr. Manhattan also ascribes to this multiverse sort of a reverting tendency towards a particular story, especially around Superman. And describes it as like an immune response that like Dr. Manhattan has come into the metaverse. He's messing around with things because he's experimenting, trying to understand humanity and Superman in particular. And that the metaverse is actually at some point started fighting back against him and the changes that he's made, trying to revert to this story of hope around Superman.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, yeah, that absolutely feels like the sort of meta story in like Promethea.
It does. And like the reason this issue is my favorite and why it plays to Geoff Johns' strengths, you know, like I say, he tries to explain stuff that seems unexplainable and make it make sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
He basically explained the sliding time scales
that
is comic books, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, in Marvel and DC, you're never more than 10 to 12 years from the beginning. But that 10 to 12 years constantly have to slide forward. You know what I'm saying? To keep it updated. So, these ideas that he threw out is something that I've been thinking about my whole life when trying to explain, like how this shit works. You know what I'm saying? And what he did was, he basically verbalized my thoughts and crystallized kind of, you know how you read something like, you know what, I was kind of thinking that, but this kind of crystallizes it for me. That's what he does with this one particular issue, right?
Yes.
He like, this is what I've been trying to say, and like he finally made sense of it, right? Like Superman is the center, and like the timeline changes around him. You know what I'm saying? Like everything has always happened, but just when it happens changes on when Superman gets there. But again, this is Geoff Johns shitting all over Watchmen, right? Because, you know, he creates the new 52 universe. And the first thing Dr. Manhattan said, oh, I like this version of Superman, I can relate. And everybody agrees that's like the worst version of Superman, is the new 52 version of Superman, right?
Yeah.
So, like, the fact that that's the version that Dr. Manhattan likes. And Geoff Johns is smart. Geoff Johns know what people think of the new 52 and what people particularly think of Superman from the new 52. So it's no accident that that's Dr. Manhattan's favorite version of Superman. But this also goes into the problem I have with using Watchmen characters at all, right? Watchmen was a complicated gray area comic, right? Everybody plays in the gray, right? There's no good / bad per se in that book. You know what I'm saying? Good characters do bad things, bad characters do good things, right? You know, it's meant to be this complicated thing, you know what I'm saying, with these people. Since this is a comic book, everything's got to be boiled down to, like, these words. That is fine when it's, that as I grow older, gets on my nerves, as in, like, oh, Superman is hope. You know, hope is like a real thing. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? No, it's not. I mean, like, hope is a thing, but, like, hope is not some fucking power. Like, you know what I'm saying? Goodness is not some fucking, like the power of friendship is not, like, a power that could change the universe. If you get what I'm trying to say, right? It's very much a childish, comic booky way of looking at things, right? So anytime a comic book, in my opinion, comes down to, like, you know, the power of love, the power of friendship, yada yada yada, right?
The real treasure were the friends we made along the way.
Yeah, or anything, yeah, exactly. Anything like that, right? I grow increasingly, like, eye-rolly. Like, it was the same thing with Scott Snyder and Dark Knight Metal, right? Which is supposed to be like this heavy metal, fucking, like, balls to the wall, like, thing where they find, like, different versions, like, all these evil versions of Batman and shit, right? And in the end, what saves the day was that the Justice League came together as friends and used all the power of friendship and hope to like, kill the fucking evil Batman. And you're just like, what the fuck? Like, I don't like.
Like, so you're saying you want that stuff in your Power Rangers and other anime derived entertainment, but your comic books are supposed to be at the other kind of powers.
Well, no, there's a way to do this where it's not so hokey, is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
And like, don't get me wrong, I much rather have, like, a hopeful DC, but there's ways to do a hopeful DC without it's boiling down to the power of hope, or, like, without actually making, like, hope and shit like an actual power, which is weird because, you know, the Green Lanterns and all the Lantern Corps. But again, it manifests. I don't know. It's hard to explain what I'm trying to say. But when it comes down to just that and nothing else, right? And in Manhattan case, that's what it was. He's fighting against hope. Like, hope is a living organism. That might work fine for a DC comic, but it's weird when you put Dr. Manhattan, Rorschach, and the Comedian in that type of story.
Yeah.
Am I off base? Am I not making sense? Do I sound like a crazy
No,
man?
no, you're no, I think you've definitely hit on something that, like, you know, Watchmen was a book about existential despair and hopelessness and the inevitability of humans fucking everything up.
Right.
And to have Dr. Manhattan show up in this book and, like, essentially just drop a bunch of exposition that fixes the entire DC universe, and then, by the way, says, oh, and, like, while I was fixing all of our, you know, problems with the multiverse in DC, I also learned an important lesson about how all of it really just means that, you know, hope and optimism and humanism. So I was wrong about that too. Like, it's a lot.
it's so much, and the fact that he hates hope and he's like fighting against hope is such. Again, it's like Geoff Johns just shitting on Watchmen, shitting on those characters. Because Dr. Manhattan was never a villain, nor did he want to be a villain, right? You know what I'm saying? So the fact that you make him a comic book villain where he's literally fighting against hope, that is the most rudimentary 50s comic book concept there could ever be. That he's literally fighting against hope. And again, that might work if it's like the Joker or some shit like that, right? But when you pull in morally great Dr. Manhattan, it just seems off.
Yeah, it also I also want to say I feel like the just even the idea of like Dr. Manhattan actually fighting the Justice League,
right,
is weird.
Uh-huh.
Just because he's always been so disengaged with humanity.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't he just be like, oh, you all came to Mars to see me. The easiest way to resolve this conflict would just be to have you all not be on Mars. Right. And just like transport them all back to Earth. Like, him even taking the time to fight with them feels weird.
I do like that when he's on Mars, he's fighting the Question, Blue Beetle, and Captain Atom.
Yeah.
Because, those are like the characters that... Well, I find it funny that Captain Atom is the only one that can kind of hurt him.
Yeah.
Because, Dr. Manhattan is based after Captain Atom. So, yes. like I found that really... Like, I found that, like, a small, cool thing that Captain Atom, who you don't see, just comes out of nowhere, like, oh, I get it, because, because of their shared history, of course, you know what I'm saying? But, yeah, so, I thought that was pretty cool, but, yeah, so, I guess there's a couple of things I want to talk about, now I guess we could wrap this up. Well, okay. There's 2 or 3 things. Number one, well, not number one. What do you think of, I want to call him Punch and Julie, but it's not, the Mine and Mariette?
Whatever.
Wow.
I mean, I feel like Geoff Johns tried to do the Watchmen thing of giving them a sort of like sympathetic backs, like there are moments where we like them and there are moments where we don't like them.
Right.
But I wasn't crazy about them.
Is there any particular reason why?
I think it may be that their true significance in the story ended up being that their kid would be adopted by Lori and Dan.
Yeah.
And so they were introduced and given like a half-assed backstory that took pages away from other things, and then they were just discarded.
I think that's being me. I think they have a pretty thorough backstory, but I still agree with you though that they like it's weird that they're even in this story, and apparently what Johns wanted to do was he wanted to take his own like spin on charging characters. So these 2 characters, now of course when you see them, the first thing that comes to your mind is Joker and Harley Quinn, right? That's everybody like frame of reference, right? But actually, these are based after the Charlton characters Punch and Julie, who's also integrated into the DC universe. Who actually like around the same time Tom King was using them in his Batman run. So it's weird to have like. So he was like, well, Punch and Julie was in charge, then I'll make my own version of them, just like Alan Moore did with the other Charlton characters. So honestly, in my opinion, I feel like they're just there for that more than they are for any story reason. That he just wants to make his own spin.
Well, he made a checklist of like, these are the things that went into the original book. I have to do this as like one of the achievements, you know?
Right. like I kind of like them. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna say that I don't dislike them as much as you do, but I do feel like they like you. I do feel like they're a bit unnecessary, but I do like them. I look, in my mind, I just want to explain how the fuck the mind get a magical gun. Like, what the fuck is going on with that? Because there's nothing like that in Watchmen, and they're from that universe, so I have no clue what that's about.
I was hoping that it was just an invisible gun.
Maybe it is,
and not that he had like the power to like finger bang people.
I think it might, but even if it was an invisible gun, like, well, that's the thing though. If it was an invisible gun, it would still have like weight and shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like he just pointed his finger. It didn't seem like he pulled it out from nowhere. It just seemed like he would point his finger, right? That, am I wrong?
No, you're right. It definitely seems like that. But I mean, any sufficiently advanced technology just looks like magic. Why couldn't it also be like an extra light gun made from some lightweight reflective aluminum or something?
But again, it would still have weight and a mass that he had to put on his person.
Yeah.
Right? But he never did that. We never see that he just point his fingers.
Well, maybe, he's good with the sleight of hand. I don't know. I feel like I was also surprised by that and frustrated by that. So you're not wrong.
Like, and I try not to get bogged down by things like this. In fact, I think I'm the one always telling you, man, just go with it. And, like, I couldn't go with it. Like, I kept having questions about this magical gun. So
I was going to say, speaking of, like, just checklist achievements from the original Watchmen that Jones felt he had to bring back in, really quick, what did you think about the story within the story for this one, the movie?
Carver Coleman?
Yeah.
Oh, my favorite part of the whole damn book.
Same. I was like, I want the pirate comic book. I want more of this specific crime noir story with the actor. Like, yeah.
I love Carver Coleman. Man, that right there. I love in the end he gets a happy ending. I do like that. I know. I just gave like this book a whole lot of shit about being hokey and shit, right? But I love that the fact that he came out, then he came back and won an Oscar, and then like he helped gay rights throughout his life. I really do. I know it sucks. I mean, not that it sucks. I know that like I just complain about shit being hokey, but I appreciate that he doesn't die like a horrible death in 1954.
I just wonder if maybe there's something about if like those smaller stories within the stories, if the writers feel like they don't have to be as clever, right, and that because they're following sort of like storytelling rules, it actually comes out better.
Huh.
Like if he was trying too hard in the main story and was like, I don't really have to worry about like the actual detective story that's happening in the movie that's happening in the background, and just makes it totally like, he's like, this is totally predictable and derivative, and it ends up being great.
So let me ask you something about the Carver Coleman story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, with the Tales of the Black Freighter story in the Watchmen comic, right? It seems a dojo, and it is to an extent, but like you could read that Tales of a Black Freighter story within that comic, and like kind of see the parallels with that story to what's happening in the comic. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like a metaphor, right? So my question is, with the Carver Coleman story, how does it fit within the main story of this comic? Because I'm like, maybe I'm just being dense, you know what I'm saying? But I couldn't see a clear connection like I could with Tales of a Black Freighter as far as like an allegory goes.
Okay, so for Tales of the Black Freighter, the main twist in the story was that the sailor who was trying to save his town he actually became the monster that destroyed it.
Right.
Through the motivation of wanting to save it. And that's I mean, that's like clearly what Veidt and the Watchmen did, was they wanted to save the world and they ended up destroying the world to save the world. So in the detective story, The Adjournment, I think the main twist there was that he was trying to solve a mystery around two men were dead in the same place. And he was looking for one of these men as the target and one of these men as the innocent bystander.
Right.
And I think that is kind of the parallel that we're supposed to draw, is that we're looking at these DC timelines and we're seeing the fallout of Dr. Manhattan essentially like targeting Superman and different heroes in different events. And we're not able to see until the end who's the target of what's going on and who are the innocent bystanders. Right. And in the end, it ends up being all about like some other woman that wasn't even in the room, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like that might have been the connection. I mean, it's definitely not as like explicit as the Black Freighter was. But I still felt like that innocent bystander, that you can't tell the difference between the target and the fallout.
Yeah.
To be sort of like consistent with the rest of the message of the book. Like it doesn't matter if you were the one who was supposed to get killed, you're still dead.
Yeah, right. And just like his whole story being tragic, I guess like you said, it's not as explicit. And even though it's not as explicit, I enjoy, like I could read like 6 issues about Carver Coleman.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a bit much, but like I really did like that, cause again, it reaches in that weird gray area. You know what I'm saying? It's and it's like the most human anybody is in this damn book.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it probably resonates. And like you said, maybe since it's inherent to like modern day story, to like traditional storytelling techniques. Okay. So actually that was going to be like my other thing, was the Carver Coleman thing.
Okay.
The Punch and Julie, Carver Coleman, the ending. What do you think of the ending with like them basically erasing all the New 52 Clark Kent parents being back, and most importantly, Dr. Manhattan dying, I guess, and giving like the Mighty Marionette child powers, and then giving them to the houses.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of all that?
I mean, again, it goes back to this this idea that you and I feel really weird about Dr. Manhattan becoming hopeful.
Yeah.
And for him to say like he's essentially saying, I want my world to have a Superman. Like Adrian was like, Dr. Manhattan, you have to come back and save like our world. And he was like, oh, I know how to do that. Our world needs a Superman, so I'm going to make sure that our world doesn't blow up. And then I'm going to get a kid, and I'm going to give him my superpowers, and then I'm going to give him a safe and secure family that will love him and understand him. And then that's what you need to have a Superman for your planet.
Right.
And I was kind of like, wait, really? Like, essentially God, the best he can do is Superman?
Well, I think the boy has his powers. I think.
Well, right, but he's obviously modeling this after the Superman story. So yes, he has Dr. Manhattan's powers. So it's not Superman's power set, but the point is he was like, oh, the reason that I wasn't the right person to save our universe was because my mom's name wasn't Martha.
Martha! What did you get that name? What did you know it? No,
Right. So he was like, oh, I need a Martha, and then I could have been Superman. So he's like, I'm going to try again, and I'm going to like have someone with my powers grow up with a Ma and Pa Kent, and then they will grow up and be the person who can actually save the universe and give us hope.
Right.
And I'm like, again, I'm just really like, wow, Dr. Manhattan doesn't even need to be like in this galaxy anymore. He could do whatever he wants. He could go visit super cool stars and aliens, and instead he wants to be like essentially yeah. I want to be like a 5-year-old boy on Earth with superpowers. Like, I don't know, man. That seems kind of pedestrian for him.
So,
I mean, he could go like he could go to I don't know, like the moons of Jupiter and build his own planet.
I was just about to say something. What made this is my second read of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is your first read, right?
Yeah.
My first read of this was over 2 years. I like and separate like that, like, it's not that bad. I got problems or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I definitely had problems with it, but like, I guess it's not that bad. It definitely doesn't live up to the name, but it's not that bad. Rereading this the first time after watching the Watchmen show make this book 10 times worse.
Yeah. Yeah, because it would be very easy to say, oh, it's just not really possible to do a good Watchmen follow-up. They did the best they could.
Right.
And now we know that's demonstrably not true.
Because the original Watchmen is bold and take risk. The TV show, which we'll talk about next week, is bold and it takes risk. This book does the exact opposite of that. It is risk averse to its core.
Yes.
In my opinion. So,
yes.
Amanda, would you recommend this book?
No.
Do you think it's a worthy follow up to what many people consider the greatest comic book ever written?
No.
Okay. All right. I don't. Okay. You know what? We're not going to end on that down note. I actually want to end with a piece of news.
Okay.
That I specifically saved for the end of this as opposed to the front of this. Because I figured it would kind of end like this.
Yeah.
Amanda, DC announced that Tom King, one of our favorite writers, I'm assuming he's one of our favorite writers, is writing a 12-issue Rorschach comic. Amanda, how does this make you feel inside?
So,
I'm sorry.
I mean, look, Tom King is a really good writer with a lot of emotional intelligence. I am so tired of people going for Rorschach. Like, there were other Watchmen characters. Like, I feel like I would rather read Tom King write a comedian story.
I think that would have been better.
I mean, like, we don't really know what angle he's going to take, but I just feel like this is like the wrong match for him. So, I mean, like, he's a good writer. Like, I'll be really interested to see what he does with it. I think if anybody can give us a really good character-driven Watchmen follow-up, it would be him. But again, why? No one's asking for this. And then also, like, why that character for him?
It's this thing where, like, I feel almost the exact same way, but my problem is I think Rorschach is too on the nose for him. Cause like we've read 2 like Tom King stories.
Yeah.
For this show, and like his stories are always about PTSD and trauma, right?
Yeah.
Rorschach is perfect for that, but that's the thing. What strikes me about it is it's too much of the obvious choice, like, right? It's too much, because I feel like that's what this is going to boil. I could be wrong, right? But I feel like this is what this is going to boil down to. And the reason Mr. Miracle and the Vision stories work so well, because, like, those are 2 characters you don't think about when it comes to trauma and PTSD.
Yeah.
And he takes like a bent view on them a bit. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, look at it from this perspective.
Yeah.
Alan Moore already did that with Rorschach and did it really well within the Watchmen comic on why Rorschach is so fucked up. You know what I'm saying? So, like, what could what could Tom King do different than exploring this subject with Rorschach that Alan Moore already didn't do in Watchmen? But again, we could be wrong. This could be a straight up detective story. It could be nothing about any of that.
Honestly, that would be like, I mean, we already know a little bit about the setting of this book just from the press release, but it would have been awesome if it was just like a one-shot story set in like the 1960s of like Rorschach and Night Owl just doing like a Batman story.
Wouldn't that be
yeah,
like which is what I kind of want. Look, if you're gonna make them comic booky in that type of way, I would be like, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. But you know, honestly, there's actually like, they might have already done that, Amanda, believe it or not.
Mm.
Because like there was a series of Watchmen books written called Before Watchmen.
Oh yeah.
And I actually hear they're pretty good. Like, we're not going to read them for Watchmen month.
Honestly, I heard Doomsday Clock was pretty good too. So there's a lot of people I have issues with right now.
yeah. There's a lot of people I gotta fight. But no, but you're right. But like one day we'll get to those. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, like I said, we don't know what it is. I'm interested to see. Like, I'm going to read it. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
I guess we can look forward to that in a year.
Yeah.
I guess. Yep. So, Amanda, what are we doing next week?
Next week, we are going to further explore Watchmen adaptations by taking a look at the HBO miniseries.
All right. Now, Amanda, if people wanted to reach us and talk to us about high expectations and ultimately being disappointed, what could they reach us?
Our disappointed listeners, along with my parents, could find us on Twitter. We are Comic Book Club 52. They could email us, comicbookclub52@gmail.com. We're on Facebook as the Comic Book Club. And you and I are both on Twitter and Instagram a little bit.
Right.
But seriously, like, we don't post a lot. Like, we don't spam with stuff that isn't super relevant. So we're a pretty safe follow on social media.
You can find me on Facebook modeling my outfits, maybe with a championship title. But yeah, so yeah, Amanda, thank you.
Yeah.
I think this has been great. I think this has been a pretty successful month of Watchmen. You know, I will say, if nothing else for you, Amanda, I think the last 2 weeks of the movie and this have made you appreciate that book way more than you probably did before.
Yeah.
Because you see how hard it is to try to do what that does. Anyway, we see you guys next week for the HBO Watchmen miniseries. I'm Jamil Payne.
I'm Amanda Comey.
And we are out.